everyone, and welcome to
the Women's Game.
Let's go with the Women's Game.
Wow.
I like it.
She's being like super nice. Like pause for me. Like I feel like maybe I'm gonna have a catastrophe of a day.
You already had a cat catastrophe of a day.
I did though.
Because your cat decided to take off a bit.
Oh my goodness! Like I went to get a package. She took right out the front door. I was like, no.
Anyway, not important.
Yeah. Not important. Well,
you have to be exercise.
You have to be a cat lover though, I think, to like really understand how you're just like, what is happening? Okay. Anyway, I did.
And I will not. Oh my word! I almost forgot. I literally almost forgot. I was going to move over to the book.
High five.
Yes, high five.
We wrote Literary Life Guides with Pop Poetry. And I'm just gonna mention one, y'all, because
no.
I'm just gonna. Well, Nona, I'm telling you now. I'm just gonna mention one, and I thought being grown up was easy. Check it out on audiobook, y'all. It's so much fun. Really?
No, keep talking. Keep talking.
Y'all, well, no, it's just flashing the books. I said I'm mentioning one. You can find out everything your ladies are doing on www.answewethought.com, co-host.
Hi, I'm Tanya Todd. I'm an author and actress and the new hostess for the 52 Love podcast, where we explore different intimacy tips once per week just to help you improve romance in your relationship.
Every time she says it, I love it.
I love it so much. All right.
And you know, the sad part is I'm never going to have another relationship and I'm still loving it.
She's in a relationship with yourself. That's what you said. She's like, oh, I'm married to myself. I'm married to the idea of me being amazing.
Yeah, I am.
All right. So
but that's not important. We have a famous guest.
And a wonderful guest.
So wonderful, famous guest. Would you like to introduce yourself?
I would, but I'm looking over my shoulder for who this wonderful famous guest is, but I guess you're talking about me. So my name is Carly Waters. I'm a senior vice president, senior literary agent at the P.S. Literary Agency, where I've been for 10 years now.
Well, yeah, we call agents
the celebrities of the literary
world. You are definitely famous in the literary world. How about that?
Like agents are the celebrities of the literary world. Like they could be like, I demand you roll out a red carpet, and authors would do this thing. They would be like, sure thing.
Jade, I have a secret for you. Jade, do you want to hear my secret?
Yes, absolutely.
That's one of the reasons I wanted to be an agent, is because I like being on the glam squad of the literary world.
There's nothing wrong with being on the glam squad. There's nothing wrong with it.
So I have
many other reasons too.
I have a question that has nothing to do with anything literary style. My question is, so what do you wear for your glam requirements as a literary agent?
Yes.
An excellent question. So I have worked from home the entirety of my agenting life, which is 10 years. So when I get to go to conferences or Zoom or other things, I have a little wardrobe that I get to rotate. And used to be, J. Crew, and now I'm into COS, and I rotate around the brands over the years and various loyalties. But yes, I have my little glam outfits for when I go to conferences.
That is amazing.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I love it so much. Yes, yes.
I don't feel bad. When I tell people we have our own little glam outfits, and I'm like, no, now people like Carly Waters has it. I just try to imitate her.
I know.
I can't emulate, just imitate.
I just want to imitate her.
Okay, so we're gonna let you get to the hard questions.
Oh, the great questions, because Tanya always
don't come from us. As you can tell by our questions.
Stop.
Tanya.
Well, you just mentioned that you've worked for home for 10 years. Does that mean that last year, working at home as a mommy and an agent, there was no real shift for you? Or did you still have to deal with challenges specific to last year?
Oh man, you're just coming out with the hot questions off the gate here. So I actually had my second baby the week it was declared a pandemic. So I brought our second baby home. It was a pandemic, and then my toddler, who was supposed to be in daycare, they canceled it because it was, COVID lockdown. So we had everybody at home, my husband worked from home, the toddler home, which I thought it was just going to be me and the baby for a few months, but everybody's been at home for the past year. So yeah, it's been, for somebody that had really worked out all of my, this is my prime time for working, my workflow, how I work best. Definitely had to rethink all of that and make some space in our house for my husband and I to work. I took 4 months off maternity leave, came back, I think, in about June. And it's been a wild ride, I must say. It's like, so June, when I came back to work after maternity leave, was right after the George Floyd murder. And
yeah, I was going to say, anything interesting happened in June that might have affected your literary role?
Yeah, so that was so the weekend of the protest was the last, the protest started the last weekend in May, I think. And then I came back to work, I think it was June 1st was the Monday. And yeah, the world was rocked, you know, and it just, you know, as you guys know, there's been so many moments in 2020 and now 2021, where as soon as I feel like everybody gets a handle on their life, you know, things are just thrown up once again for us to reconcile and debate. And publishing is a very empathic industry, which I'm sure you can imagine. You know, we talk about books and our feelings a lot. So publishing, you know, when something happens like that, you know, a racial reckoning, you know, Me Too, anything where it's like a real upheaval of anything like that, you know, publishing takes a real moment of silence and, you know, goes to the protests and really participates in an active way. And we have a lot of work to do, and, you know, in our own reflection, you know, from what everybody's discovered about themselves and their lists and their imprints over the past year. And a lot of people have been doing that work for a long time. But needless to say, publishing kind of, you know, slows to a halt when big moments happen. Even, you know, we're speaking, I don't know what the date is today. We're speaking January 18th. So last week was the coup. So so, you know, publishing takes the day off and the week off. So yeah, we flow with social movements, and we flow with you know, what's going on in the world.
I
What
love
are
that
your
you said
thoughts
that.
on the current wave of support toward diversity and inclusion in publishing right now?
Repeat that, Tanya. I just missed the beginning of that.
What are your thoughts on the current wave of support toward diversity and inclusion?
Yeah, I mean, anything that's obviously performative looks performative, and anybody that can, you know, can see through a lot of things that, you know, are performative. I think a lot of the work that needs to be done is more around like retaining, right? It's not just about like hiring people and, you know, making things diverse optically. It's about retaining employees in publishing, working hard to make safe spaces, not just say you're a safe space, but like, how do you actually prove you're a safe space? So as an agent, I feel like my role in all of this is really just been working even harder for my authors of color than I ever have been. I mean, obviously that's, you know, priority for me is to work hard for all of my clients, but there is a difference between the way that clients of color are treated versus white clients. There just is, right? So you know, I just make sure that when I'm negotiating for them, you know, I'm just fighting as hard as I possibly can, because if publishers, you know, these billion-dollar organizations want to put their money where their mouth is, you know, they better put it where they're, you know, where they're going to spend it on authors of color and help to, you know, support them. So, you know, there's lots of things to be done. One of the things I personally do is I have a mentorship program for people of color that want to become agents. So I had my first cohort in 2020. And we do weekly Zoom workshops with various people across the industry, and I write them reference letters, try to help them get jobs and internships. So I had my first cohort in 2020, and then my next one is starting in the spring. They start March 1st. So I take 15 people and try to train them and teach them to become literary agents if they want to. Yeah, so that's my personal passion project, is diversifying the agent landscape, because I feel like it's one thing to, as a white agent, work really hard to diversify my list and my thoughts, but it's another thing to create a whole new lane for somebody else that's going to have unique thoughts that, you know, and relationships to work, like writing and words and authors that I never will. So making more room at the table for other agents is one of my personal goals.
So how can people be involved with that project?
Oh,
Yeah.
Sorry, I just wanted to know how, I
Yeah.
figure your listeners are going to want to know, how would they get involved with that?
Yeah. So it's an unofficial mentorship. So I don't run it through my agency, P.S. Literary. I run it personally in my free time. So currently I'm at Carly Waters on Twitter, just like it sounds, CarlyWatters on Instagram and Twitter. And so I have all the information on there. I'm accepting, I don't know when you guys are going to run this, but I'm accepting applicants for the spring session until February 1st. And then I'll probably do like a spring session and a fall session. I'll probably take the summer off. So, you know, just follow me, ping me, you know, just let me know if you're interested or apply. Basically to apply, all I'm asking is just for you to email me with your general interest of being an agent. I'm trying to keep the barrier to entry really low. So I'm not saying like you need this degree or this experience. It's more, do you have the passion? For me, as anybody that's passionate about their job, one of the most important things is what you want to seek to mentee people that you see going the distance, right? So for me, it's just who really wants to be an agent. You know, I don't care what your background is in terms of, you know, what degrees you have. It's more just how badly do you want to be an agent, because this job is a lot of grit. So I'm just looking for people that really want to be agents. And they just email me, carly@psliterary.com, just with, you know, their email.
Thank you so much, Tanya, for asking that question. Thank you, Carly, for answering that question. Now, my question is, you talked about being an agent takes a lot of grit. Can you explain to, I think, just a normal writer, they're like, oh, the agents are the glam people, so they're not really doing anything. Mm-hmm. And no, it takes a lot of work to be this glamorous. Can you explain what that grit is?
Yeah, absolutely. So I can talk about it in a couple different ways. I can talk about it financially and then talk about it obviously as a tastemaker. So I'll start with the financial stuff because I think that's what a lot of people don't know. So most agents, and I'll go through a couple different structures, but most agents work on 100% commission. So we're essentially entrepreneurs and we're essentially self-employed, such as myself. So the grit is you have to believe in yourself, right? And like an author has to believe in themselves and their writing, an agent has to believe in their taste and their ability to kind of be a tastemaker and sign clients and, be able to make a living, right? So we get 15% commission from domestic sales and, other commissions through TV and film rights and foreign rights, but, the domestic sales are obviously the bulk of our work. There are other agencies that are very traditional, and I, don't need to name names, them all, the kind of New York brownstone type of agencies who give a salary to their assistants. And then once they start signing clients, they do what is called a draw. So they'll start to get commission on top of their salary, usually until the commission kind of overturns, you make more than your salary, and then they start to be 100% commission after that. Some of them have some sort of split. So you get a bit of money for doing a foreign rights assistant job, and then you get your commission from your agent job. So there are various ways to kind of, put an agent living together. But what most authors don't know is that any agent that's 100% commission agent usually has another job for a few years, myself included, because you can't live on, 100% commission, especially as most people know, as authors, you get your advances in 3 parts. So the signing, the delivery and acceptance, the publication, and then obviously, hopefully someday you'll get royalties. But we don't promise that. So you can imagine an agent getting 15% of that, right? We need a lot of clients, a lot of business over many years. So there's that grit of it, the financial grit, right? We have to believe in ourselves to know we can actually make a living as an entrepreneur. The other grit being, do we have what it takes to go through the slush pile to find the clients? Like, do you actually believe in your taste? Can you grind it out? And, sometimes for a lot of agents, generally 3 to 5 years is what we tell people to be able to make a living at it, with that financial structure of commission base. So there's just a lot of grit. And obviously as it goes on, I've been doing this 10 years. So, the grid is just in different places. We have to be, there's relationships with editors that I've had for 10 years. Right. And so it's just, being very thoughtful about, the relationships that we have with editors and publishing houses, but also we have to call them out when they're, being completely ridiculous in terms of their contracts or this merger that's going through between 2 behemoth publishers. Right. And so agents are the ones that have to be the bulldogs. So I always say that I am friendly with editors. I never say I'm friends with editors. I say I'm friendly with editors because I just don't believe that, we can be friends necessarily when, you're working for a business that doesn't have my client's best interest at heart. Right. So it's just like balancing all of that stuff as the career goes on. Grit is kind of the best way I could describe it.
I love it. I love how you explained all of that. See, so you get to be glamorous, but you also have to work really hard for it.
Yes. So as one author said, like when they were like literary agents sent out rejection letters, they're always like, I assume they're like in a club taking shots, just saying no in between. And I'm like, no, that's not what they do. No. So thank you for explaining that.
Yes.
Yeah. And then I have to ask the question that is obligated for me to ask from every literary agent. Obviously, we have to ask. What do you represent? What are you currently looking for? And what makes a great query letter?
Mm-hmm. So for me, it is a lot of book club fiction, upmarket fiction. I do commercial, like crime and thrillers, domestic suspense. I do a little bit of memoir. I do essay collections, a little of pop science, pop health. I also do a lot of cookbooks, which a lot of people don't know. I have a big list of cookbooks. So I'm pretty much everything across the board except for science fiction and fantasy. I also don't represent poetry just because it's like a very niche market and, not a lot of money in poetry. And so the authors that do write poetry don't want to give their little commission to agents anyway. It's poetry tends to be its own little world. And I don't do a lot of I don't do any middle grade. I do select picture books and no YA right now, unless it's an existing adult client that writes YA. So pretty general. I would say I'm a generalist. The way that I describe my list to anybody that asks is I say I represent books that people want to talk about. So, I'm trying to look for buzzy topics, ripped from the headline fiction, memoirs that, everybody wants to read. So I'm not really looking for niche topics unless it's told in a really, broad, accessible way. I'm looking for nonfiction that's going to move the needle, novels that people really want to talk about and get their book clubs on and that sort of thing. So, yeah, did that answer the full question?
Oh yeah,
Yes,
absolutely. And I love how you
letter.
said that poetry was just over there to its side. Thank you.
It is.
We know.
It is.
We know.
Yeah.
Because people always go, they're like, so why don't you ask the literary agents that you know? And I'm like, would we want them to be poor? No, that's rude.
We want people to eat, y'all. We want you to eat.
I love poetry. I read poetry every night. I have like a stack this big. I buy like probably 30 poetry collections a year. Like I am a huge advocate of poetry and buying poetry and its contribution to the literary community. It's just as an agent, that's not my niche.
No, I'm sorry. It is us making a joke about
because we're poets.
Yeah. So
moving on. So what do you look for in a query letter, which is what every author's going to want to know?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, it's very short. So I'm really just looking for, so the way that I break it down is like the 3-paragraph format. So I'm looking for in the top paragraph, just the title, the genre, the word count, and if you have a little like hook you want to throw in at the top, any comp titles. The next paragraph being like the back cover copy, keep it really salesy. I don't need you to spill, the beans in terms of if it's a mystery or a thriller, like what the secret is or anything like that, but write it as salesy as you possibly can. And then the third paragraph is just the author bio. And I tell a lot of people, a lot of writers ask me like, what if I have nothing to put in the author bio, right? Like I'm a debut author. And I always say, just saying like, I am a debut author, like I live in Texas or I live in Denver or, just something really one-liner is totally fine. Or, what your degree is in or something like that. You don't have to tell me like a cutesy thing about, making up some flowery language. You don't have to go into detail about your job unless you think it's relevant. So sometimes like librarians don't realize how relevant their job is. They'll be like, oh, like I'm a librarian. I'm like, that's a great thing to write in your author bio. Mm-hmm. Or if you were ever a bookseller, or you even were in academic publishing. So there's like a lot of things that are kind of adjacent that you might not think to put in your bio, or like podcasting, right? Like there's just so many like niche things that actually kind of do relate to publishing that I would suggest people put in it. But if you just, have no background and you're just putting it out there, this is my debut novel, like I love it, right? I assume that you're a debut novelist if you're in my query inbox. So, my referral system is for people that are published, and that's great too. But debut novelists don't need to be shy about calling themselves a debut novelist or anything.
Do you think people?
Oh, that was a really nice point right there.
I think out of every writing class I've ever been to, I always say to the class, right, you're a debut novelist, because literary agents are there to find first-time novelists who are actually good. And then the teacher was like, don't do that. That's the kiss of death. So thank you. You proved me right.
Yes.
Not important. That was not important at all. Tanya, go back to the serious and hard questions.
Yes.
Well, I do have like a quick follow-up to that one. Mm-hmm. For you said, sounds like you go for the typical book, hook, cook kind of format. Yep. In the cook segment, do you want to know if they're part of any writers groups?
You know what? It doesn't really sway the needle for me at all. Like if somebody is very proud of that and they're passionate about it, they feel like that's part of their writer identity, or they're part of like a committee and they want to mention it, that's totally fine. It's not something that sways the needle for me, but it does suggest a seriousness, right? And so one of my tenets of agenting is like finding career authors, right? Like I want to find people that want to write many books and, think about this really seriously. So, putting something like that in there would suggest author, the idea that they want a long career. So yeah, I would say that's a valid thing to put in there.
Okay, and then the next question really for me is on Twitter recently, you posted something that touched on something that's really important to me because of what I write. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to quote your tweet.
Okay.
I think women writers are often pigeonholed into women's fiction or beach reads, especially if they are talking about domestic topics. When male authors write about the same topics, they are considered literary. In fact, there's no such thing as men's fiction. Will you please expand on that comment?
Yeah, happily. Yeah. That whole interview with Women in Our Town is pretty much me ranting about that. Yeah, I feel really strongly about that as somebody that works with anybody that works within a system has to sometimes abide by the system and then sometimes fight the system, right? And so being within the system, there are ways that I have to work within the system. So I say I do represent women's fiction authors because women's fiction is a category. It's a category that sells well. I love reading it. And so I do use the term, but I don't use the term without criticizing and questioning why I am using that term and why we think it's okay to use that term. And what the future of that term looks like. And so that's why I try to say book club, upmarket. But if I'm having a lunch with an editor and they're, we're talking about our lists and, seeing if we have any connections, I'll say women's fiction, of course, because that is, a valid category. And it's one that, like, what does women's fiction mean, right? You ask one agent, two agent, three agents, different editors, we're all going to say different things. And so generally for me, it means a female protagonist, generally talking about quote unquote female issues, and whether for some women that's heavy on romance, for some women that's heavy on family, for some I prefer things that are a bit heavier into work or through plot. We're questioning things, feminist things, patriarchy, relationships, friendships, sexual identity. Like there's ways we can push the boundaries within that system. So that's the kind of women's fiction I like. So yeah, it's something that's constantly changing. I think that one of the issues with women's fiction is also that it tends to be very saturated because there are a lot of women authors writing about their lives. And unfortunately that gets pigeonholed into women's fiction, right? In a way that men's fiction, men writing literature doesn't get
no, they're writing about their lives too.
Correct. Yes. We don't call it domestic men's fiction. So I'm sensitive to what is unique about the books that I represent. And so the women's fiction that I'm looking for, as I said, is like trying to push a boundary in some way. So whether it's about not just motherhood, but ambivalent motherhood, not just, friendships, but, adult friendships, just trying to figure out like what's the angle and how is it going to be different, that sort of thing. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I loved it. You said a different angle.
Well, I have an answer for the women's fiction court to fiction, but then I'm thinking, should I speak my mind?
I don't know. No, I don't know. if you without a filter thought you might want to like filter it, I'm gonna go with let's err on the side of caution and say no.
I'm saying it.
I know you are.
Hear
but
it. I want to hear it.
Jade
She's going on the record with a no.
But think about who was given the opportunity to write first.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, they got to design they got to say what the genre of fiction and nonfiction is.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously, it's fiction.
Also,
and then the people who are allowed to write secondly, well, then that becomes a different set of fiction. So that's why we got fiction and women's fiction.
Yeah.
Also, publishing has been around forever, y'all.
Yeah. I was gonna say, so women's fiction, when it's around for 800 years, so it'll just be fiction.
Well, there aren't going to be any men left, right? We're just taking over the world, I thought.
I don't know. I won't be alive, so I don't know.
Who run the world?
Oh, that's so sad. And you're right. We won't be alive.
It will be 800 years. If I was 800 years old, I'd be like, I'm tired. I'm ready to die.
You know what? And that's why you have to write. That's your legacy, right? So that's what you leave behind.
See, absolutely. Like our poetry. Our pop poetry. Sure.
Yeah, that'll never be our legacy. So let's move on. Tanya, did you have one more question?
One last question.
I would like to know, have you seen a shift in what publishers are looking for due to this specific 2020 environment? And I'm not just Black Lives Matter, but the pandemic, the fires, the election, just everything we had to go through last year.
Yeah, all the calls that I've had have still been quite tentative because, as I'm sure that you guys know, and I know I can elaborate for the readers, is that publishing generally works about 2 years in advance. So anything that editors are buying now probably won't come out until late 2022, 23 at this point. So we're working pretty far out. And so all the conversations that I have with editors is like, we want to be post-pandemic then. We want to be this, we want to be that. Like, how do we, number one, as I've always said, right, we're tastemakers and we're trying to like set the tone for, the literary community of like where we're going to be then, but we don't know. Right. And so there are nonfiction books that are being crashed about the pandemic, and crashed means like publishing a book within about 6 months. So there are pandemic books that are being crashed now. over various topics. There's books coming out, there's deals and books. I think there's a book coming out this year about what we as a culture and a community can learn about all of the pandemics of the past 100 years. You know what I mean? Like trying to be like bigger than this pandemic, but like let's take a broad look at pandemics. There's going to be a lot of public health books, in the nonfiction. I'm talking just nonfiction space, right? And so it's going to be a lot of addressing the like psychology and the financials, right, of this. They're calling it the first female recession, right? Like, all these women that have to step back in their jobs because they're homeschooling their kids this year, right? So there's going to be a lot of, I call it like pandemic adjacent books where, there's going to be a lot of nonfiction around what we've discovered about ourselves, but publishers are very hesitant about buying them, right? Because these books aren't coming out for 2 years, we have to think about, is that the type of thing we're going to want to read then? Are we going to even want to read about the pandemic in 2 years? Are we going to be like, bye, that was like a season of our life we never ever want to deal with again? And then in fiction, every fiction editor that I'm speaking with wants to skip the pandemic. So they don't want to talk about the time with masks. They don't want to talk about that specifically. And so fiction, I think we're just going to like skip over that. There is one book, I forget who wrote it. But like a mid-career novelist is coming out with a book this year, where I think there's some sort of mention of the before, and it's like a contemporary novel, and there something about like masks or like the time before. So I think some people are dealing with their own ways. But it's hard, and even editors don't really know what to do yet, right? So we're still feeling out what the right thing to do is. In terms of pandemic books, obviously, there's as we talked about, the social justice stuff. Publishers have a lot of lip service that has been delivered, right? And we need to see whether that is going to go the mile and the full distance. And so a couple of moves that have been really, really positive is that one thing that they've been hiring externally women of color for senior level and executive roles. A few publishers have done that, which is great. The only thing that I don't love about that is that they're not promoting from within. They're like bringing other, you know what I mean? Like we're bringing from the outside, which is fine. Like obviously that's great, but there's a lot of mid-career women of color that would also like deserve to be promoted. So I'm worried that we're making like outside moves for the optics without like promoting women of color from within, if that makes sense. So, skeptical, but very pleased with how far, the visuals in terms of what the hires, and pretty much all of them started January 1. So, and again, we have to see what they're going to acquire, what that culture is going to develop like, but that's all very promising. So yeah, I think there's a lot to be revealed in terms of deals that are announced over the next 6 months, just as people kind of get their footing and publishers decide what they're, how they're going to put those action plans into place. I'm thinking about things like Flatiron and that American Dirt scandal. Like, what is their list going to look like to kind of for reparations for how badly they published that book? So, there's work to be done, and we have to keep our eyes open and keep them accountable, right? That's our job, is to
right.
I'm going to say right here that something I wanted to say at the beginning. I believe it was Whitman. Don't quote me, because I do not do classics.
She does, but she doesn't limit them.
No, I don't. But no, I don't think it was Whitman. Oh, anyway. Well, someone said that a writer or a poet their job is to be the conscience of a society. So we're to observe what the society does and then sit and point out what is wrong with the society. And
what is right.
What is right, yeah. And so as a literary agent, I find it refreshing that you take so much responsibility and being like, I need to point out what is wrong and or right in the society. Because I've never heard anyone say before, I'm a tastemaker. So that's amazing. Yes.
Thank you. Just doing my part.
So this is
I will say that these responses that you've given us, the way you've spoken, that is why you are a rock star in the literary world.
Absolutely.
Not just because you're pretty, it's because you know your stuff and you're confident and you know what you're doing.
Absolutely. And so we did not
appreciate that
when we said the famous person in the room.
No, someone told me she was famous. I was like, I'm interviewing Miss Waters. And they went, she's famous. And I went, oh, okay.
So I guess your J. Crew outfits really rocked it.
That's what I'm saying.
The glam squad came through.
Well, someday when we get to travel again, I'll have a whole new glam look. So, let me know when you're going to conferences and I'll come meet you.
I think we should do this, like a literary agent fashion magazine.
Oh yeah, that
we
should
should still do it. I mean, if you guys are the glamorous ones, we should have y'all's fashion.
Yes. What to wear to the conference. Anyway,
2020.
You could pitch it to Bustle or something. I think they'd cover it.
I'm sorry, who does?
Oh, I was just saying like Bustle or something would cover that, I think, if you pitched it to them.
I feel like it would.
I'm not pitching it for them. I'm pitching it for my own magazine. I'm about to do this year.
And 2020, we're gonna be like with the pajama pants on the bottom because we're still in Zoom world. So you're just I have
everything will be Lululemon on the bottom, business on the top. That'll be everybody's outfit.
Yeah. Right, that'll be everyone's like that's my secret. I have really fuzzy slippers. Like it's great. They are great. All right, so
it's about that time to wrap up.
Yeah.
So, Jade, wrap us up.
Where can people find out more about you and what you do?
That's a great question. So I do have a website, really simple one, carlywaters.com, where I have all the various interviews I've done. So once this one's up, I'll have it on there. I've done a bunch of podcasts lately, so you can find them on there. Interviews like that Women in Our Town one that we were talking about, my quote about women's fiction, that's all up there. There's also client endorsements if you just want to read what my clients have to say about me. But most of the time I am on Twitter and Instagram. So it's at Carly Waters, just like it sounds. Both of them are public, so you can follow me. On Instagram, I've been a lot more active on Instagram lately. I've been doing, I do Q&As about every other month where anybody can ask me questions, and all day long I'll just answer like on video, and save it to my highlights. And then every Monday I do like a little story on a topic. So today I did what happens after you sign with an agent. So you can get little video clips from me over on Instagram and on Twitter. I'm at like 27,000 followers, and I just kind of talk about whatever I want in regard to publishing and cultural things and articles that are interesting to me. So you can get a little taste of who I am, I think, on social media.
Okay, thank you so much. Tanya, where can people find out more about you?
I'm across social media at Ms. Tanya Todd. You can find me on IMDb. Just look up Tanya Todd. And then my new podcast is the 52 Love Podcast. That's on Anchor. It's on Google Podcasts, Spotify, and then you can also watch the video on YouTube.
All right. Thank you so much. And thank you, Ms. Williams, for coming on today. We really appreciate it.
It was a pleasure.
It was a pleasure.
I can finally do a because this interview is over.
Yeah, right. I had to drink some coffee before this. All right. And you can find out everything your ladies are doing on www.andweethought.com, including
where you can hear professional actors read my TV script.
Right, which is on the homepage. Go down and you'll see the Ladies Tale podcast, along with wonderful interviews that we've done on there also. So but more importantly than all of that, right? That's how I'm going to say it. Run with it. You can go to the ladies tab, go down to the middle and see the charities that we probably support. Maybe you can support them too. And we thank you in advance for that. And just remember, y'all, the wisdom is all around you if
you're open to finding it and accepting it. So peace and love, you guys, from Will No.
And Jade. Bye-bye. Oh, yeah, thanks for listening.